Alright. So welcome everyone to the Summer in Italy painting. This painting is sponsored by Warminster Library this evening, this class. So thank you so much to Warminster Library. This is being recorded, so obviously if you are attending, or even if you know someone who is registered and can't make it, you'll still get the registration link. Also, there are more of these recorded programs on my YouTube channel, and at the end of this, I will put my YouTube channel in the chat. But let's get started. Also, for those that are new, my name is Anita Thompson, and I own Art Venture Workshops. I am a mobile-based artist, and I teach mostly for libraries, but other facilities as well.
Welcome, but I can't hear him.
And we are going to get started. Oh, I just had somebody else come on. So we are going to start with our 5x7 canvas. Now, if you have a bigger one, that's fine. But basically, you can see that it's in landscape mode. So you want to make sure that it is longer, width this way. And we're going to get started with the drawing. And let me just let somebody else in. And so you're going to need your pencil first. I feel like this one is I say this all the time. I feel like it's an easy one. And the reason I do is because it's much more flowing. You can be a little more free flowing with your paints. Okay, so we're going to start off now. I'm just going to recopy the information in the chat one more time because we had a few more people just pop on. But we're going to start off basically with our landscape line.
I'm not crying out loud.
All right. Let me just make sure everybody's muted. Hello, everyone. Okay. So we're going to start off with our pencil. And basically, I'm going to move this over to the left so that my unfinished one is to the right, just because I'm right-handed. And we're going to create the line first between our landscape and our sky. And so we're going to start off on the left side of our page. And basically, we're starting off at the top of our canvas, but we're going to go down maybe about 3 inches. And we're going to start off and make the first section, and then we're just going to go straight across with our hilly landscape.
I don't understand why I can't hear you. Not connected.
Okay. Now, once we do that, we're now going to create the sections of the hills. So we're going to go down a little bit, starting back over here to the left, and we're going to go down. So basically, we're doing this section right here. So we're just going to go across right there. Okay. And then we're going to come back over here into our first hill. And we're just going to make a few more sections here. So we're going to be doing this with the pencil. And then guess what? We get to start painting. So when I say it's kind of simple as far as everything, the way it's drawn, then we go back in and use most of our brushes, or use our brushes for the most part, is what I'm trying to say. Okay, so back over here. So we have some different color changes here. And so we're going to kind of draw that in. It's going to look a little bit like this. So we're going to have this sort of strange shape, and then we're going to add another hill. So right now we have a bunch of shapes. It doesn't look like it means anything right now, but basically that is our separation of some of our colors in the landscape. We are going to go back in and draw one more section, which is going to be right here, another hill. So we're going to start off at this pointed area. And we're just going to draw one more landscape area here. And then we're going to do one more that's going to be above this one. And so my finger is pointing where it is. And so we have a small bump and then a bit of a larger bump here. And that just goes to the end of our canvas. So right now we have just a bunch of separated, sorry, I have a piece of stray paint over there. So I make sure everyone's caught up. And then we're finally going to deal with this bottom half here. And so we're going to be drawing a line going from here to here, because then starts our sort of flowery fields. So come over here back to the left. Again, a little bit down from this section. And basically what we're doing is we are just drawing a line for this section right here. So you see that it's a little bumpy and it's going downward toward the bottom of our canvas here, but it sort of doesn't go all the way to the corner, but it's going a little bit downward, and then we go right across. And we now have the basic of our landscape. And that's it as far as the drawing goes. And so now we're going to start getting into the paint. And we're going to start off with the sky. So we have two brushes. We have a flat brush, right? And it's a little bit thicker. And that's going to be mostly to fill in our background. And then we have a round brush, which is more pointed. You can have more brushes in between if you like, if it's helpful. But these are our basic brushes. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start off with mixing our blue, or actually first using pure blue and then mixing some white with that blue. And then even a little bit of red and blue so that we get a little bit of purple. But first, we're going to start off with our basic blue. And so I'm going to move my round brush over to the side, and I'm going to use my flat brush. So again, that's my bigger brush. It's flat across the top pretty much. I like to dip my brush in water first, and then I kind of tap it a little bit on the side on the paper towel I have. And then, yeah, phthalo blue is great. Cerulean, cerulean would be nice, but I think the phthalo. Yeah. So if you take a look at my blue here, right, it's sort of a basic, I think this is actually called bright blue, I'm just using, Loft, or I think is it Artist Loft from Michaels. And so what I'm going to do now is just go all the way across and paint a blue sky. That is our first layer. So you're going to cover the first, I don't know, three-ish inches of your canvas at the top with this blue. And then from that, we're going to start adding in the shapes of our clouds. We're going to be lightening the sky a little bit. So we always start off with an under layer. This is like our first basic layer of our painting. And with acrylics, because they dry fast, but they're great when they're wet, because you can start to add in other colors and they start to blend with each other. So if you notice, I'm being really careful as I'm going up against my landscape here. So just take your time. Again, this is more of a looser painting, which I think translates to more fun, relaxation, right? Joan had said earlier, sometimes she just wants a, a more a relaxing, she said a hard day at work and wants something that's relaxing. So I think Joan, this is going to fit the bill tonight. Especially, yeah, especially knowing Joan's her style, the way she paints, I think it's very Van Gogh-like. It's free flowing, lots of color. But yeah, you can make this as detailed or as impressionistic as you like. But the base of our sky is going to be that blue. And when you're done, we're going to start to mix some other colors using our blue. So I don't wash off my brush because we're still using that blue. But what I am going to do is take a little chunk of it and move it over, kind of extend it, because I'm going to make another color. I'm going to make a few colors off of this blue. And so wherever your blue is sitting, if you have the room, you can sort of extend the blue a bit so that you can start to mix. We're going to start to mix some colors. The first being white. So I'm going to grab a little bit of white. And you're going to see me as I'm mixing this lighter blue. So I added just a little bit of white to get this next blue. And then I'm going to make another lighter blue by adding more white. Still keeping that lighter blue that we mixed on my brush. And I'm going to mix it in so that now I have a palette of the regular blue, sort of my medium blue, and the light blue. And we're still going to not wash our brush yet. And that's because we're going to add a little bit of red into this light blue. So we're still keeping the light blue, but we're going to add just a little bit of red. And that's going to give us a lavender. So I'll say that again. This color is blue, white, and red. But we've made the blue very light. So if perchance you have to make some more blue, which I did have to do. So I'm going to add a little bit here, but then I'm going to add some more white to get it back to the light blue. And then a little bit of red. And we've got a kind of a lavender blue. That's going to be part of our sky. Okay, and then we're going to do one more color. So I'm just washing out my brush now because the next color we're going to do, and you're probably thinking, this is a lot of colors for such a tiny painting. It is. So washing off my brush because the next thing we're going to do is we're going to do blue and red. So we're going to get a purple, more of a purple. So I'm going to take a bit of this blue and I'm going to keep mine right around my regular blue area because we're going to use that as a darker area. And then I'm going to mix the red in. And you're going to get a color that is a little bit darker of a blue. Like that. So again, that is red and blue combined. If you want it to be a little more purple-like, you would add more red. It's hard to tell on Zoom, but this looks more now like a darkish purple. It does still look like a purpley blue to me. I could add more red. Basically, this is for the sky. Just mix it all in. And so basically, that's going to be the first color that we are going to be using is that darker blue or purpley blue. So you can see that right there. And basically, let me put my camera a little bit closer now. So we're going to start off right at the top here, the top left corner. And we're going to start to add, basically, you can see that there is some darker areas up here, over here, and then toward the right of the corner there. And so let's start adding that color. And basically what we're doing is we're starting off having the color in the background of the clouds. And we want this to be nice and wet because our clouds are going to need to be more transparent. So I'm doing this with my flat brush. If you feel more comfortable or you think that you would feel more comfortable using your smaller round brush for these smaller parts, please feel free to switch it up. So again, what I'm doing is I'm sort of creating the sky in between the clouds. And that is our darkest part. And then I'm going to rinse off because we're going to start going to our middle blue. So I rinse off. I wipe my brush. I'm wiping it on the side here on the paper towel. You can have paper towels. You can have, if you have a rag that you use. But next we're going to go into our medium blue here. I have to mix a little more because my room is always a little bit dry. The drier your rooms are, the paint will dry quicker. So I've just had to mix real quick a little bit more. And so now with this one, what we're going to start to do is we're now going to start to, again, create the sky around the clouds. So how do we do that? So it's almost like I'm making a cloud, but I'm actually thinking about the sky in between. And so basically creating the blue on top of the other blue that we've created, but this is sort of our mid color. And you can already tell at this stage that it's looking a little more like a sky, right? So I'm going across, and because my paint is still a bit wet, I can take my brush and kind of like pat it along in order to get a little more of a transparency. And you can even go up into the dark blue a little bit. So I'm going to show this up close just to show you. Let me put a little light on it. So just taking my brush with the blue, and I'm just very carefully kind of dabbing. And then we're going to go into the next blue. So I like to leave a bit of this blue on my brush because we're now getting lighter. And we're going to go into the next blue, which is the lighter blue. I am going to add a little bit more white because, again, mine started drying out. So we've got our very light blue at this stage. And this is when we're going to kind of start to go in. And we can still create cloud-like areas with this light blue. And so in order to make the clouds look puffy, again, I sort of dot it and clump it. So I'm going to start clumping it now toward this bottom area, and that is soon going to be taken over by white as well. But we want to get that lighter blue in behind the white. So first, we get that in so that it will be the background of when we create our white clouds. And your clouds and your sky do not have to look exactly like mine. As a matter of fact, it won't. It's going to look like yours, and it will be lovely, but it will have all these, all these different colors. So think like cotton candy, right? Like fluffy, a little bit transparent. And we are just going to get lighter now, as we are now going to start to build up the clouds. And what I like to do at this point is wash off my brush and get into my white. And then I work backwards. At some point, your water may look incredibly milky, especially with the dark blue. And we'll have a chance to switch out our water if you want. I always like to do some clean water when I work with darker colors, but it will not affect much of your painting as long as you are making sure to wash your brushes. All right, so our next step is we're going to get into our white, and we're just going to add a little bit on the edge of our paintbrush. So see what I did here? I have a little bit because this is a tiny painting. We don't want to overwhelm our clouds with too much white. And we're going to start at the bottom here. because that's sort of our darkest, or I should say brightest area. And so first we're going to kind of go across. And as we're going across, you're going to sort of skip spaces of the sky. So that you're kind of creating the clouds. And you're going to go straight across, you know, with your sort of cloud formations here. Now this is just the first layer. We can go back in and make parts of it a little darker. And we can go back in and make it a little bit brighter. And we will be doing both. But we are now laying in our clouds. And we're now going to lay in our clouds for the rest of the space. And so we've got one here, right here toward the left. You can then, you know, grab a little bit more white as you then start to go underneath. So I'm pushing and kind of pulling a little bit with my brush. And again, it's not a real dramatic, you know, not a real dramatic, my brush, I should say, my brush is not loaded up with tons of paint. I prefer to have a little bit of paint. And then if I need to, I will go back and add more, like I just did now, to make it a little bit brighter. Right, and now I'm making, kind of dotting along, making the cloud shapes. You can make some lighter by having just some leftover white on your brush, and it makes it a little more transparent. And then I'm coming back over here to make a little bit darker cloud. But it's easy going, very light as you are working your white and light blue into the clouds. So again, I like to kind of position where some of my clouds are now going on top of the sky, but then we will go back and we'll make in between, you know, on the sky part, we're still going to add some more different layers of color. But here I went back in and added a little more bright white. I love making clouds. I think it's so relaxing. I also tend to get a little bit whiter towards the horizon line. So I actually take, you know, some bright white right up against where our greenery is going to start to be. You know, and we can still go back after we start our greenery. That's the great part about the sky, is you can kind of go back and add some of your brighter or even darker areas. So here I just added a little more of some bright white to that cloud. And now I'm going to start working a little more in reverse. So adding in a little bit of some sort of light blue. And now remember, we have that lavender color as well over here. That is also going to come into play. So I'm just going to show the original up close. There is lavender here and here. Let me see if I can move the light so that you can see it. There are little tinges of lavender on top of the darker areas. I even have lavender in the lighter parts of the clouds. And all over here, I have lavender. So you can put it inside the whites of the clouds a little bit, right? But if you see, nothing is really, like everything is very diffused, very, there's just a little bit of everything. Because if you go too much paint on your brush, it's going to kind of overwhelm it. And clouds are fluffy and transparent. You should be able to see some of the sky, coming through. And that's what we did laying in the sky first. So anyway, I'm going to add some lavender now so that I can show you. Perhaps will inspire you to do the same. You want to leave it out, you can. But I feel like it adds a little bit more, another dimension of color. So here is my lavender right here. And it's very subtle, right? And now I'm going to start adding it in. It looks a little bit gray on Zoom. I'm going to mix in a little more red so that the red kind of pops for you. There we go. And I just add, a little bit. Again, it's on the tip of my brush. You can see that, it's barely, I'm kind of like, almost like as if I were applying it with a sponge, very transparent. It's going in with the other colors. I'm going to add a little more here. And then I'm also going to now add a lighter blue in to kind of tie a lot of these colors together. So the lighter blue being, remember the blue and the yellow, or I'm sorry, not yellow, not yellow, not yet, white. And I'm going to make a very light blue. Almost like the color of the clouds, like a few colors above the clouds. And then I'm going to add a little of that and make some more cloud coverage with that. And when you're ready, you can add more white as well. So I feel like the best thing to do, especially with the clouds in the beginning, is to have your brush kind of wet along with, wet with paint, along with, so that it kind of mixes in with the other colors a little bit. And then once you have that base color, you can then go back in again with the pure white, and you can really make some of the outstanding whites of the cloud work. But again, kind of pressing your brush into the canvas, almost like dotting it along, but then also pulling, going from left to right with your brush, because clouds are, a lot of times, it almost looks like they're, I don't want to say they're in a straight line because they're not, but there's a line to them, sort of a straightish line. They're not just round and puffy. They have like a, I don't know. I'm not like I'm not a cloud aficionado, but what I've noticed is that the clouds have a bit of a straightness to them, usually at the bottom portion of the cloud, and then it gets puffy from that. And sometimes the puffiness is over the line. You know, there's a lot sort of, you can still see like a straight line, and then there's puffiness. Yeah, stippling. Yeah, I like it, Christine. Absolutely, stippling. That's a great. I wasn't even thinking of that with paint. Yeah, like a stippling effect. Beautiful.
I'm sorry, what was that word?
Stippling. So stippling means to sort of, you do it a lot in, you can do it with pencil, but you can also do it with paint. And it's basically almost like making, almost like dots, but you can also kind of make like lines. So let's see, I'm going to do something on the back of my paper here. So if I were to stipple here, like say here's my blue, right? And maybe I'm going to add a little bit of some dark blue. And so I'm going to kind of almost dot it on so that the lighter area is still showing in between, but it gives it a bit of a shadowed look. And now I'm going to add a little bit of white. Did you see how it is sort of gradually? I'm adding shading, how it goes from like dark to medium to light. And basically, it's like dots. And you can use, 2 or 3 different colors in order to make it look a little bit shaded. Thanks, Lisa, for the heart. And thank you, Christine, for reminding me of stippling. So that is stippling. So that's great. That might help you with thinking about the cloud work. As far as, it doesn't have to be straight, just the one color. Yeah, I think you should, Lisa. So what I'm doing now is I'm now adding on, again, you can do this in layers. And so I'm now adding a little bit of white on top of what I have here. So for instance, because we did the layers of blue behind this, the blue is coming through a little bit, the white, and it's creating a little more of a 3-dimensional cloud. And that's exactly what we're aiming for. And again, in order to get that, you go kind of delicately and let the darker colors and medium colors kind of shine through. So you're not trying to fight the previous colors. You're trying to sort of add to them, at least when it comes to the sky and the cloud work. So see, I'm even going back here now. I added a little more blue because I want it to be a little more, I wanted to kind of blend a little more than it was. Now, if it looks too much like too many colors, you can always go back and add a little more of the medium blue. Just kind of what I'm doing here, and going in between the clouds to make the sky a little more cohesive. And while it's wet, it's the best time to go back and add, some darker areas and let them kind of blend in just slightly with the lighter areas. And that's our sky. We are about to move on to our landscape. So this is where, if you would like to wash off your brushes, or get some more clear water, you can do that now. I'm going to go do that as well, as we're stepping into the next phase of our painting. I'm just kind of blending in that lavender a little bit. Okay, so I'm just going to walk out into the hallway into our second bathroom and grab some more water, fresh water. Give everybody a minute. I also need to check my closet. I think something fell in my art closet behind me. Let's see. I heard something. Okay, it was a shoe. We also have shoes above. We have a really big closet, and we have shoes on the top shelf. And probably when I was fishing for some more paints, I probably dislodged a shoe. All fixed. Okay, so you have some nice clean water. We are going to start the next portion of our landscape. We're now going to get into the greenery. And again, for right now, we're still using our flat brush. We use our our larger flat brush, excuse me, a lot in this painting. We basically use the round brush in this section for adding more details. And here again, you can go back in and add more clouds, or brighten up your clouds or more colors using your smaller brush, which I might do later on, after we as we start moving into our green landscape. So our green landscape, we're going to mix a few more colors again for our greenery. We want the the green against the sky. We want that to be the darkest green. And so we're going to mix green with some black. And so I'm going to take this green, add some black in, and we're going to get what I've always called a forest green. It's a dark green. And you can see it right up against my regular green, how dark it is. So very dark green. We're going to mix some of that up. So that's my dark green right next to the regular green there. So we're going to start off with that, and we're going to cover this first section with that. And basically what we're going to do, so we're going to go, across very carefully in that section. If you need to use the smaller brush, you need to switch to it, you can. I definitely do when it comes to the parts that are a little bit more, pointy, like as it gets to this part over here. But for now, I'm just going to go across. And if you notice, I did not make the landscape an incredibly straight line. It's a bit bumpy along the edge here. So in the meantime, I'm going to take my smaller brush and take a little bit of that dark green off of my larger brush in order to make it come to a little bit more of a point when it meets up with the next section of landscape here. And then what I like to do along the edge at the top is, again, I like Christine's explanation or idea of the stippling. Kind of stippling, but just with one color at the top of the landscape in order to make it more bumpy. So I'm just going to show that up close so that you know what I mean. Do you see how, it looks like it's a bumpy landscape? So that's what I mean by that. So I'm just basically taking my smaller brush. I took a little paint off of the bigger brush. And now I'm going to kind of stipple it across. And I'm going to go a little bit closer now with my camera. Now the other thing I like to do, once I have the green in there, I'm going to set my, basically I'm also going to use that green that is still on my bigger brush. And I'm going to use it in this big section right here. And the reason is because, again, this is going to be another sort of backdrop color. And we will create other colors on top of it. So again, this is that dark green. I need to add a little more to my brush here. And we're going to sweep that across this area. And if you look, I'm not sweeping it all the way up to this line here, but it's just right below. And that's because we're going to create another green. But before we do that, we're going to keep that green on our bigger brush. I'm going to rinse out my round brush. You can hear me doing that off to the right. I'm going to wipe it down on my paper towel, but I'm going to keep the green, the dark green, on this brush. Sorry about the moving of my camera here. I just want to get both pieces in here. All right, so we've got our dark green here. And now what we're going to do is we're going to add a little bit of yellow to the dark green. And so here's my yellow on my plate. I'm going to just add a little scoop of it again using at the edge of my bristles, right? And now I'm going to go into that dark green that I made, and I'm going to make a new color right at the edge inside that green. I'm going to add a little more yellow because that's not light enough for me. You're going to get this sort of murky green color, almost like a grayish. I'm showing that right here. I'm going to add just a little more scoop of yellow. All right, it should be like a grayish green. Right here. Now we're going to take that grayish green and we're now going to go across the top portion of this area that we painted. So right here, right along the line, and we're going to go across there. So basically we're filling in that area. And I like to go back because, you know, it's kind of coming upward above the area. I now want to kind of make it a little more contained along the edge. Will do, Sandy. Absolutely. Yeah, if anybody has to leave early, I will absolutely send you the recording. Thanks, Sandy, for hanging out as long as you could. Now, once you do that color, along the edge, you're going to do a highlight, and that's going to be some white with that grayish green. So then you're going to mix a bit of white into that color on your plate first, and just a little bit. Remember, this is a tiny painting, so we don't want to overwhelm it, although it might look really neat. It might look a little more kind of abstract almost. And you want to make sure, I have to add a little more white. So basically, you're going to add a highlight, meaning that is going to be like that whitish gray, kind of going across the edge of that strange green you just made. So that's kind of like a highlight like that. So can you see here? It's kind of starts at the top here, kind of goes across like that. And then we're going to use this color for this next section here, except we're going to add some yellow with it. And I like to now start switching to my smaller round brush for these remaining areas until we get to the bottommost part here. So again, on my brush right now, this is my round brush, my smaller one. And I have that grayish green that we just had on the brush that was also mixed with the white. I'm now going to add some yellow to that color. And you're going to get an even kind of stranger grayish green, but now it has yellow in it. And then once you have that, we're now going to make it look like the grass in this section. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to take our brush and we're going to kind of stand it up and make sort of, so it is kind of like stippling. Christine, I love that you threw that in there because now basically you're going to take your brush and you're going to make up and down strokes to fill it in. But then you're going to start adding in some yellow on top of the gray. And again, you see how I'm making strokes? So now there's some yellow in with the gray. And then we're finally going to add in some of the grass green that we have not used yet. So here again, what I did was the gray is on the bottom, gray paint. Then I mixed in the yellow with the grayish, greenish white. And that's this strange color. So now you have a combination of like a gray and a yellow, the dark green from before. And you're going to leave it like that for now. But we're going to start adding in our grass green, which I call it a grass green. It's this, you know, vibrant green. It is. It's like, you know, some of the grass that's happening right now. It's getting nice and spring green, right? So what we usually know of as green. And I am using my smaller brush because now I want to start getting into the strokes going up and down with my brush. But we're going to start off in this section right here. I'm going to kind of outline it for you. So this section here. And then also we're going to go down below. So this section here and this section here, we're going to fill with our grass green. Hi, Michael. I'm glad you were able to join again. Sorry if it bumped you off. I don't know why it does that sometimes. So these two sections are about to get nice and vibrant. You know, and if you wanted to switch to your larger brush, you could, but I find that in this small space, it goes pretty fast using my round brush, but it's up to you. If you're painting a larger painting, you might want to switch to the other brush. the flat one. So I forgot to mention in the beginning, the reason this is called Summer in Italy, my husband and I, for some people know this, some don't. We went to Italy last October, so it wasn't really in the summer, but it was last October for our 10-year anniversary. And I took a ton of pictures. And one of these was a field in Tuscany. And even though it wasn't summer, I decided it looked very summery to me. It was still very hot when we went. It was 80 degrees in October, which I thought was crazy. I wasn't quite prepared for how hot the sun is there. The 80 degrees to me felt like 90 with the sun. But it was still beautiful, very beautiful. But it also reminded me, I've heard that the summers in Italy are hot, and I don't think I could ever go in the actual summer. But anyway, this painting was inspired by a field of flowers in Tuscany when we were on a bus tour. And it was just beautiful. It had all these wildflowers. So these two green sections, and then we're going to cover the other two sections in a darker green, again, as the base color of the green, as we are working towards finishing this almost. But before we do that, I want us to go back into this space below, because while the paint is wet, we want to now work in some yellowish green and then finally some white. So again, we're working in this space here, the space closest to the bottom of our painting. And I like to mix up some yellow and green so that you get more of a lemony, kind of a lemony green or lime green. Right, so this is yellow and green. And then what we're going to do is we're going to start adding strokes, or I should say more like, almost like you're making blades of grass on top of the green that we have. And so what I'm doing now is taking, you can take either the side to make the strokes a little bit thinner. I'm going to add some yellow so that I can kind of show you a little more. And you do add more yellow towards the right side of this. So you see how the green is still showing through from underneath. That's what you want. So we're going over this entire area and we're making strokes of greenish yellow. And also, if it's not, light enough, I add a little more green, or I'm sorry, a little more yellow, thicker yellow. You can also, as you are going upward in this little section here, I like to add some more green strokes above in the darker section, just a little bit. And so now you can do a combination of using your regular green and the yellow. And if you want, you can even mix in that darker green that we made. I like to do that in the two bottom left corners. So we are now making a mixture of green in order to make it look like there are different, there's the light is coming onto the grass here, the meadow. So again, making these strokes, individual strokes, is important to give it definitely some variety. And then you can start to build up on the right side of your meadow some more lighter areas by adding more of that yellow, and then pretty soon yellow and white on top. But first, adding in that yellowish green. So I've done a combination here at the bottom of my painting. I added a little more of the dark green. And you want it to look like grass, right? You want it, so when it hits the following, the next area of separated green, that like dark grayish green, you can extend your strokes a little bit to go upward just very slightly against that dark color. And it makes it look like it's grass. And for your other sections here, so we started creating the line work for the grass here. We want to let that dry before we add the flowers. But then we come back over here into these sort of two other sections, and they are darker. So I here again grab a little more of the dark green in this one section, but I balance it by adding in the grass green as it's wet. So again, what I did was I started off with that dark green that we have in the background. But then as it's wet, I'm taking some of that, well, the grass green over here. And again, I'm kind of stippling it. Now, it may look like it's running into the other one as far as the color. And what you want to then do is grab a little bit of yellow to separate the color. So adding some of that yellowish, grayish green here in the separation of the hilly areas will make it stand out a little more. So again, this is while the paint is wet. We're now working with sort of wet on wet paint. And then we have another sort of hill, smaller hill here. on the right side that I just add a lot of yellow to the green as I'm doing it. And so that just made another hill. Now there's still a variation of color in that hill that we'll go back and add to, but we now have the basis of all of the hilly areas. And we're actually going to go in and add a little bit of a sliver of red in this area here. So if you can see on the original, this is a sliver of red. Where you see a little bit darker, there's red in there. So again, I'm just going to take a little bit of red. And I'm going to paint it on the edge here. And I'm going to paint it sort of underneath and a little on top of the area in between here in strokes. Again, this is red. This makes it look like there's some more flowers here in the background. If your red is not showing up over here, you can add some yellow, which will make it a little more orange. And that's okay. You can always add more, you know, the grass green here too, which we are going to go back in to some of the hills here as it's wet, just to give the hills a little more color difference. Again, you know, the stippling is your best friend. Stippling in lots of colors. And where you see lighter areas at the top of each hill, there's a bit of white there. And so again, using the side of your brush, you can stipple in some white around the top area of each hill section. And just a little bit, right? Like it just gives it a little bit of some light. There's some on this small hill too. And I like to go back in with a little bit of some yellow as well. And again, stippling, right? And just a little bit on your brush so that you're making the marks, but the other colors are still shining through. And we're about to go into the final part here with our flowers. So you can add some light white, or I'm sorry, light yellow, by mixing in a little bit of white and yellow so that you get some tiny areas, flecks of color, which is going to serve as the tops of your flowers. So this is yellow and white, and I'm using my smallest brush. If you need a smaller brush, you can do that too. But I'm starting off with using yellow and white, and I'm just kind of dotting it around. This is serving as the top parts of my wildflowers. You can have whichever colors you want. I picked yellow, red, some pinkish, some lavender. And basically, they're mostly little dots, except we have a few flowers here on the left that are a little more than just the white dots. But I like to mix up the little bit of the lighter colors first, and then I do still go back. You can make kind of sections that are close together. And basically, I'm just taking my brush, and doing really light strokes. This is, sort of far away, not real up close. You can also experiment with your brush and kind of dot it on. You can make ones that are a little more subdued by tapping your brush on your paper towel so that there's just a little bit of color left on, and it makes it a little more transparent. And then that makes it look like that the flowers are even further away and there's maybe, bunches of them. So I'm going to do a little orange here by mixing yellow and red. And then some of these flowers on the left are a little bit bigger. And so what I did with them, I would create a stroke here and then another stroke here, right? And it kind of looks almost, either tulipy or, again, I always tell people I make up my own flowers. I love flowers, but I don't always know what they are. And so I make my own up. So they sort of look like daisies. They sort of look like tulips and kind of rose-like. They're an Anita brand of flowers. I sometimes do it with birds too. So again, I'm just taking my brush. They kind of look like poppies too, now that I think about it. Make some pink ones. Here I kind of made like a daisy-like one. And I'm gonna switch to red soon. Grab some red. And then to make darker red, you want to mix a bit of red with some black. Just a tiny bit of black. You can also, do the red and blue. That'll give you a purple. can also do red and the dark purple. Or the dark blue. Making some of these darker reds back here. Make a few more yellows in this one. And then finally, I like to grab just a tiny bit of white on my brush, very tiny. And then what I do is I kind of wipe it off on my paper towel. And then I add little tiny sections of some white in the landscape, usually kind of at the top part of the hill, just so it looks like there's some more light that is kind of shining on those areas. I can add a little more yellow in this one. And then sometimes I like to go back, just add a little more of the really dark green right where the sections of the hills kind of meet up. So for instance, right here, I'm going to add a little more dark right where it meets up here, and then here on the left. And sometimes I kind of go at the top and just add, again, I'm kind of adding a little bit of that dark green again along the edge of the hill in the back there. I can't wait to see what these look like. So I am going to stop the recording, and then I'm going to remove my spotlight, and you will have the chance to show your work if you would like to. So I'm going to stop the recording now.